We're here for our reaction show for Forbidden Door, the second Forbidden Door show. And Paul wanted to ask that we're going to talk. Don't worry. We're going to talk Omega Ospreay, people. we're going to get there. But I had this thought leaving Dave Meltzer's place. And, you know, it was a crazy night because I don't think there's been that many people at Dave's house ever for as long as I've been going to Dave's house. So there was tons of people. So you got tons of feedback. You got, you know, what worked for more casual wrestling fans, what worked for the super hardcore. So it was like I was paying attention to reactions for that reason. And I came out of it thinking of asking you this question, which is this the best hardcore wrestling fan service show that you've ever watched?
Wow. I hadn't really thought about it.
It's a different.
It might be. It might, you know, like if you'd asked me if it was the best show, you know, like, yeah, that's a much different question. There was so much stuff on this show for the hardcore fans. In fact, I was just having a conversation with Kevin Ely before we went on the air about entrance music. And, you know, and everyone makes fun of me because, you know, I didn't recognize CM Punk's entrance music. No, but I mean, there was a lot of callbacks on this show. And obviously the big one was Bryan Danielson in the main event.
Yes.
You know, that everybody knows. But there was other ones that I had no idea. And people in our Discord were just going crazy for these entrance songs that, you know, I didn't recognize at all. And I'm sure there's a lot of hardcore fans out there that felt the same as those people in our Discord. And then there's a lot of other people that were probably like, well, why aren't they using their regular song?
Yeah.
You know, like, or maybe they didn't even realize it wasn't their regular song, you know, like, which is what I was. Other than Moxley, you know, like, you know, BCC not coming out to Wild Thing was, you know, a choice. But obviously for the New Japan and for this show, it was great. And you know, and a lot of the callbacks in the matches themselves and just like stuff like Kojima and Punk and, you know, like this is all for the hardcore. This isn't for the casual.
Yes.
You know, and those are the people that are buying all these shows.
And the reason why I looked at it from that perspective is because these were not necessarily grudge matches, though there were some matches with grudge. We had the continuation of the BCC versus the Elite in a really, really fun match. But for the most part, these were like dream matches. We had two of the biggest dream matches of all time. One was a part 2 of what we were probably going to get a series of some sort. And the other was the main event, Danielson and Okada, which I don't know if you ever thought we were ever going to see that match like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Probably not.
It never even crossed my mind, I'll be honest with you, until they announced it. And then when they announced it, it was, oh, wow. Okay. You know, so it was like, yeah, this is the kind of match we're going to get now because Bryan Danielson's wrestling again. And because the Forbidden Door has been knocked down, you know, so I'm sure Danielson's got a list. You remember that list that Cody made? I bet you Danielson's like 3 times as long.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it is. And not only is it three times as long, but the fans have a list. You know, when Cody left WWE the first time, you didn't have this like surplus of fans going like, oh, I can't wait to see Cody wrestle X, Y, and Z. They didn't really know what he was going to do, right? No. Until he was like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I love wrestling. With Bryan Danielson, when AEW signed him, they're like, oh my gosh, there's just a countless number of things I want him to see. So I found that question to be the main question coming out of that show because I went into this show and I mentioned in our Discord and to others, as far as AEW shows this year, I've been to both AEW pay-per-views live previous to this one, and I was more excited for this one than I was for those 2 shows that I went to. And I think ultimately this show delivered to some of the highest expectations that I think a pro wrestling show has ever had. Did you feel like it delivered to what you thought going into the show?
Yeah. I mean, and my expectation, like my anticipation, hype, you know, whatever, was, I said like maybe the biggest I mean, I'd say the biggest ever. I'm sure there was some WrestleMania back, in like the 90s or something that I was more excited for. But, like this is in that I can remember. This is the most excited I've ever been for a pay-per-view. And I thought the show over delivered.
So it actually out delivered your expectation.
Yeah. But that said, I wouldn't even necessarily say it was the best pay-per-view I've ever seen. Like I still think that All Out 2021
Yeah.
is right up there. And it may not even be the show of the year because I mean, you had that Puerto Rico WWE show, but I mean, those shows so far over delivered this one, you know what I mean? So it's it's all
WWE has a fun way of,
yes,
you're skeptical and then they deliver and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it.
Yeah, and if we had the same expectations for the WWE shows as we do for AEW, then you might not feel the same way. But I mean, and this is again recency. I may go back, in a month and say, oh my god, I mean that Forbidden Door show was so great, because I mean I think I got my star ratings here somewhere, and I had I think I had 4 matches that were like 4.5 stars or better. Like that's incredible. And I don't remember a show that ever had that. And then another one at 4.
I feel like last year's Forbidden Door, Dave came to the same consensus as like per matches. It was like the highest star ratings he'd ever given or something like that.
Yeah, but then there was nothing on last year's show that touched Omega Ospreay on this one, I don't think.
Yes. I mean, not even close, probably.
Well, it's funny because our friend John Muse said, "Oh, I think that was the best match I've ever seen live," and I'm like, "Okay, first of all, you think, and secondly, like, oh my god, like, what matches have you seen? Like, I really want to know." And I'm not even saying that, like, I'm not questioning him. I'm just like, oh my god, like, I can't believe the matches you must have seen if this wasn't immediately the best match you've ever saw.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a longtime fan and he's been to Japan to see wrestling.
Well, he was at Mania 3, so he saw Savage Steamboat live, and I can't imagine what that would have been like at that time.
Right. And I bet you he's probably one of those guys who's like, yeah, Savage Steamboat was great, but I saw Flair have better matches.
Yeah, and he saw some matches in Japan and all that. But I mean, this may have been the best match I ever seen. I think my standard answer when someone asks me that question is usually Omega and Ishii in that U.S. title tournament.
The Long Beach match?
Yeah.
Interesting. I saw that match live.
Yeah, I thought you did.
Yeah.
And so this probably, I think this passed that. And I think even the Dome match passed that. But for me, tonight passed the Dome match.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get to that. We are doing this live on YouTube. So the folks who are watching, if you want to drop comments in on the question that I just asked Paul about the fan service show and whether it's the best fan service show you've seen. Also, I want to know where does this rank Omega and Ospreay 2 in your favorite matches or best matches of all time or whatever, and drop those in the comments and it'll add to our conversation because so Dave Meltzer asked me after that match was over, he said, is it in your top 5 greatest matches of all time? I have a different list of greatest matches and favorite matches. The problem with the greatest matches is if you think about the evolution of sport, the Omega Okada matches had to exist in order for these Omega Ospreay matches to exist, right? You had to have something there, and now Omega and Ospreay are trying to get close to that, or maybe even go over that in some people's minds. So the evolution I find to be so interesting because, people who are saying whatever they said about that match, they didn't see certain matches, way back in the day. But at the same time, those matches from way back in the day, they were only topping what was before their time, right? So I think that's how you kind of have to look at this stuff. And so I'll ask you the same question that Dave asked me, which is it in the top 5 greatest matches you've ever seen?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I kind of already answered that. It may be the best match I've ever seen. Like, that's my immediate reaction. And I have a hard time thinking of one that can top it, just because that Wrestle Kingdom match I thought was the best match I ever saw, and this was better.
So you're talking about these matches being better than
Yeah.
the ones previous to it, which is Omega Okada, which is
Yes.
an interesting thing.
Oh, you know what? The Omega Okada, I think the fourth one. That's the one that actually passed Omega Ishii for me.
Okay.
That would have been the best match I ever saw.
So just checking in the comments, Sam Shipman, who did the pre-show on our YouTube channel earlier today, she says that she thought the Wrestle Kingdom match was better, and that was my initial instinct.
Okay.
I'm sure Dave and Brian are going to do their show later tonight, and Dave will probably say the same thing, that he liked the first one better. But
the dome.
but when when you compare matches that are that close in quality, I think, to me, the thing that makes that first one better is just the finish. And some of the people didn't like the Don Callis stuff. Now, you have to have the Don Callis stuff in that match as far as the storyline is concerned to get where you're going next. Because, again, I'm assuming we are going to see a third match. Now, there are some people who probably think that, if you're a little bit more creative, you didn't need the Callis. But Callis is part of the program. You cannot have him not be in this. You can't send him to the back. The crowd wants to yell at him. The crowd wants to curse at him. Like, he is part of the deal. It's like saying Paul Heyman cannot be ringside with Roman Reigns during this Bloodline saga. So I would say it wasn't my favorite finish, and we'll get to that in a little bit because I want to hear what other people think. Aiden says it's the greatest match in AEW short history. I think I would agree with that. Kevin Ely, same thing. And but at the same time, I think most people in our instant feedback is in the Discord, and that's talk about real time feedback, right? You're seeing it the second someone sees something and their fingers are moving on their phone. So you get that instant reaction, that instant analysis. And I think that's what was a slight turnoff to some people, was the Don Callis stuff. So if you're like looking at this in a vacuum, I would say first match better, second match not quite. And here's what I want to ask you.
Okay.
The finish in which Ospreay grabs the screwdriver, pounds the screwdriver into Omega's forehead, and I think then he hit the Stormbreaker. He may have even hit the hidden blade after that as well. But to me, if you go home there, to me, I think it's just as good of a finish as where they got, and maybe even, and we're not talking about really believability here. That's not the point. But I think if you go home there, I'm happier with Danielson Okada. And when Danielson Okada ended, I was talking, I have the logic calculator right next to me, John LaRocca, who we watched, and he loved Omega and Ospreay, but I'm sure he'll say what he didn't like about it. But we both saw Okada tap out, and it was like, well, after you get hit with the screwdriver and then you get hit with your own move and you kick out at one and it keeps going. Like, Okada's shoulder really needed to be separated in order for us to believe that he was going to tap out, just based on what we had just watched. So when you look at it that way, I would say, yeah, maybe I didn't love the finish, but that's not the way that people watch wrestling or even think about wrestling matches. Because what's going to happen is people are going to remember that those two matches are on the same card. People are going to remember that both matches were really good. But they're going to look at Omega and Ospreay without even thinking of how it then led into Danielson and Okada. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. That's just my initial instinct. And I said that in the Discord, knowing full well that people really did enjoy that finish. So that would be my comment. And to Dave, I said, you know what? The top 5 greatest matches of all time probably all have Kenny Omega in them. But I would still have Austin Bret Hart on my favorite matches in the top 5. But I can also acknowledge that because of the evolution of wrestling, because of this sort of new ladder of how do you top things, or what do you top? that match was from 1997. So,
Yeah.
we're talking, 26 years later, Austin and Bret Hart were only, topping what was before them. So that's where I would sit there. But really love the feedback coming up. And if you have more feedback, add it in. Let's go from we'll start at that match and just kind of go through. We don't have to go through every single move because everybody watched the show. We're kind of giving our analysis on it. So I just want to go through a couple of things before we move on. What did you think of the blood? Because it looks like outside of maybe some real blood that Tony Storm had blood coming out of her nose, they really saved the blood for this match. I don't think there was any blood in the BCC Elite match, was there?
I don't think so. No.
So did you think the blood added to and was necessary in this match?
Necessary? No. Added? Yes. I think if I'm remembering right, I think Will bled in the first match, but maybe not Kenny. But I might be remembering that wrong. I mean, I watched it the day after the show, and I haven't watched it since. So I have a notoriously bad memory. But I thought it definitely added to the match. I thought the announcers did a really good job of putting it over and how it was affecting the wrestlers and how even like it was, how they could smell the iron at ringside.
Yeah, that was a good line by Excalibur.
Well, I think they got that from Daniel Cormier on UFC the night before.
Oh, is that what it's from?
I think so because they were on ABC last night, and Daniel Cormier used that exact line, as well as using championship opportunity. But
what is he? He's
he's a WWE honk.
Yeah, he's trying to get in WWE.
Yeah, but no, I definitely thought it added to the match, and it didn't bother me at all.
All right, so long match. I think it was 39 minutes and some change. Not that far away from the 60-minute time limit. As I was watching the show, I was like, okay, Paul and I got to record at some time. When is this thing going to be over? And that they deservedly so. They earned that time, and it was.
I wonder if did they just get the time that Filthy and Adam Cole were going to get?
Yeah, that's possible, right?
Their match, yeah,
that's possible.
Yeah.
So lots of V triggers. There was, I think, Will even hit the Kamigoye at some point. There was a little bit of a discussion of whether Kota Ibushi was going to show up here or whether he's showing up in AEW in the future. I think it would add a nice little. A nice little thing to their feud.
People were expecting him to be one of the security guards, actually.
Oh, really? Was that what it was?
Yeah.
And so I like, how and where do you extend this feud?
I mean, I think the natural is Wembley. Will beat him in his home country. Now Kenny's going to want to beat him in his home country, and then and then the question is, what do you do in that match? But let's get there first. If not there, then the Tokyo Dome next year, probably. I know that's what Jeremy Feinstein is pretty headstrong about. But to me, I'm like, I think you have to do Omega Ospreay 3 at Wembley.
I would love to see it just because of the crowd, that big crazy crowd, just the environment, just who gets cheered more, that kind of stuff. It will be very amazing in that building.
You have a chance to do an all-time great moment, like Brett and Davey in 93 or 91, whenever it was. And I don't think and the tickets are sold. The pay-per-view is going to sell whatever the pay-per-view is going to sell. I think you just do that match.
And then, so as we get here to the finish, and if you haven't watched the match, I imagine when it comes to the second day buys or third day buys or whatever, just off of how people feel about this match, they should do some really good business there. So Don Callis was chased out of ringside by Kenny Omega, and there were, like Paul said, there were 2 security guards there. So at some point, probably around the 30-minute mark or maybe a little bit before that, Callis comes back ringside. Kenny's loading up on these V triggers, and Ospreay is just dead. He's just hanging on onto the ropes, and Callis tries to cover Ospreay so that he can take the bullet for Ospreay. And Omega calls his bluff and goes and throws the fourth one. And of course, Callis, the coward, he moves out of the way. Ospreay takes another one. He's like halfway outside of the ropes. At this point, Don goes into his pants, and he struggled going into his pants. I'm like, brother, your pants are too tight or something. Pull this thing out. Pulls out the screwdriver. Now, this is a callback to all of what we were dealing with when it came to the Elite last year when they came back and they were in the feud with the Lucha Bros and Pac. And so grabs Ospreay's got this screwdriver. Omega puts him in the V-trigger position, and he just blasts Omega with this screwdriver in his forehead, hits the hidden blade, then the Stormbreaker. And Omega actually gets to the ropes. So he gets the ropes. Cal's can't believe it. Ospreay can't believe it. Omega's out of it. Ospreay starts hitting him. I think this is where the Kamigoye comes. And then he hits the one-winged angel.
Yeah. And then he kicked out at one.
Omega kicks out of his own finisher at one. This dude hulked up.
I screamed. I literally screamed.
This was Hulkamania in his prime.
I was banging my feet on my footsteps like I was like a little kid. Like you couldn't believe. I had the Discord. I wasn't even on the Discord. I just wanted to pay attention to this match.
You pulled the MSL during Samoa Joe and CM Punk, where he just is like, I'm not going to call this match.
Oh my
watch in the crowd.
So I think the psychology there of having him not be pinned by the screwdriver and the Stormbreaker was to make people think, okay, if that wasn't the finish, then obviously Kenny's winning. So I think it was a bit of like really deep psychology that they're doing, because these are smart, hardcore fans. So you were not expecting Ospreay to win after he kicked out, after he didn't get pinned by that. But then to what you were saying earlier about the main event is I think this goes to, and this is a problem I had actually going into this pay-per-view. And I brought this up in the Discord ahead of time about Danielson and Okada being the best in the world. It's the best in the world. They're fighting for this mythical title of best in the world. But to me, that's Omega and Ospreay. And then you had them hit each other with everything they had and all these amazing kickouts and everything. And then in the main event, it was just, there's a submission and he tapped. So which one does the viewer think is actually the best in the world? Is it Danielson or is it Will?
Yeah.
And I think, anybody watching the show thinks Will Ospreay is the best in the world, not Bryan Danielson. And maybe that's where they're going to go.
So, okay. So what I thought, I'll tell you what I thought when Kenny kicked out. My thought was, oh man, they're going to miss the peak and Will's going to win. And it's just that, they just want that one last hope spot to pop the crowd. That's immediately what I thought. I still thought Will was winning the match.
Okay.
So, but it's also because I'm kind of cynical about these finishes, because in my mind, I'm not going to get fooled, right? That's how I watch wrestling. Is like, okay, I kind of know I'm not going to let myself get fooled, even in a match as good as this. That's just kind of how I watch wrestling. So that didn't work to make me think Kenny was winning. It just made me think they're trying to fool us, and thus, we're still going to get to the same place. So I'll describe the rest of it. So after Omega kicks out at one, Ospreay, then he hits the blade, and then he hits a Tiger Driver where he drops Omega right on top of his head. And this is where I was like, oh no, this is what we get for missing the peak of this match. Then it's another blade, then Stormbreaker for the win. So wins. I think people will agree with you coming out of this thinking, like, if you haven't seen Will Ospreay, what a great first moment of seeing a professional wrestler who just had probably the best match or the second best match of his life, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
But Will did come out of this match. Will and Kenny came out of this match as like, these guys are the tippy top of what this business with these two companies can provide. And I think that's a very logical outcome. Now, Daniel Bryan, who beats the legend in the actual main event, he didn't have as good of a match. I think there's going to be a lot of intrigue around Big Dave's. I think I already know what Big Dave's going to give it.
He's going to rate it higher than I did.
But I'm not going to spoil it. Maybe
Okay.
he'll give it away on Wrestling Observer Radio later. But I think it's a logical conclusion. You come out of this match thinking, "Wow, Will Ospreay is the best guy." And the other thing that you come out of this match thinking is, shouldn't Bryan Danielson be facing Will Ospreay next? Like, that's kind of a natural pro wrestling conclusion. But because this show is really an all-star game, that's probably not even anywhere on their radar, right?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's not on their radar. I think it's going to happen at some point.
Not
But
off of this show, though. Probably not.
probably not. I think most people are expecting a rematch. Or, I guess I would say maybe Danielson and MJF, but I mean, we already saw that earlier this year, and don't know that we need to see it again. I mean, it's funny. I didn't really think about Danielson Ospreay until we've just been talking about it now, and and I brought it up a couple minutes ago, and then you just said it again, and maybe that is what they're going to do next. Danielson Ospreay at Wembley is a fine match, especially if they're saving Ospreay Omega 3 for the Dome.
Yep.
I mean, you could, and I'm sure Danielson would put Will over in Wembley, and that could be the great moment for those fans. And that would be the real main event over there. And then, you could have Omega, maybe Omega and the Bucks against Aussie Open, or something, I guess. Jeff Cobb or something. Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, there's a million matches you can do. But yeah, I kind of like, the more we talk about this, the more I kind of really want to see Ospreay and Danielson now.
Yeah.
And honestly, if Danielson could beat Ospreay, then maybe I do think he's the best in the world. Like, I said in the thing, like, I don't even put him in my top 5 in AEW right now.
You have an interesting ranking there, though, by the way. Yeah, I saw some of the names that you were putting in there. Not that you shouldn't.
I didn't give my names.
Well, I've seen you say so-and-so is top 10, so-and-so is top 10, so-and-so is top 10.
My top 10 favorites and my top 10 best are completely different. But I mean, if you're talking AEW, like, I would put Omega, Moxley, MJF, both Bucks. Like, there's 5 right there.
Moxley's would not put himself above.
I know, but Moxley's a modest dude. I think Moxley's great. Like, he can do so much. But that's a whole nother discussion. But I mean, that's not to say Danielson sucks, like, by any means. And and talk to me in a week, I might have a different answer for you.
Yeah.
So,
all right, we're gonna skip around here because I kind of want to go by importance here, and let's talk about the main event. And it's funny that the main event wasn't the most important match on this show. Shows you how good the show was. So
absolutely.
Bryan Danielson against Kazuchika Okada. Like you said early on, Danielson came out to Final Countdown, and we were having a discussion in one of the channels in the Discord about whether that's important. Is that something Danielson wants? Is that something Tony Khan wants? I think we've heard Danielson in the past say that, he's kind of over that song or something like that. And you even mentioned, you're like, yeah, like, even the hardcores remember that song most, but most Daniel Bryan fans remember the other song from WWE. And then and there was some our buddy Brad had some interesting trivia about that song actually being Claudio Castagnoli's wife's song that he then took that from or something like that. So that was I didn't know that. That was some hardcore trivia. So this match obviously had to follow, but it didn't immediately follow. There was another match before that, so the fans kind of were able to get their energy back, though it was late on the East Coast. I don't think this match was over until about midnight, or maybe right before midnight.
3 minutes. Yeah. 11:57.
Early cattle mutilation from Danielson. Okada did his dive over the barricade and then came back into the ring, put on the money clip. Lots of their signature moves. Danielson's little running drop kicks into the corner, and then as he's trying to hit the third one, Okada hits the famed drop kick, which we know is kind of like the transition of the match of going from fourth gear to fifth gear. Okada goes to the top rope to hit the elbow, and Danielson catches his arm, puts him in the label lock. We saw a tombstone on the stage, and this was funny, kind of a funny moment. I was asking, of course, the logical calculator, John LaRocca. I was like, wait, what's the count at? Because these dudes have been out there for a long time. He's like, well, Bryce came out and he had to stop the count because he's like checking on Danielson, and then he does the double count on both of the guys. And I think Kevin Kelly said that his excuse for Bryce Remsburg was that he was having to triage the situation. So we kind of had a running joke inside the house of what the doctor and what Bryce Remsburg could possibly be triaging instead of just refereeing. So they're both back in the ring. Okada hits the elbow, and then Bryce calls for the doctor. Now, before this match started, I told the entire room, I said, he's going to try and fool us about some sort of head injury, and I'm going to hate it, and I'm going to buy it because I'm so worried about him as I watch him wrestle. Like every time I watch Bryan Danielson wrestle, in the back of my mind, the concussion stuff is always there. Like I cannot forget about that when I'm watching him wrestle. The MJF match, which we were both at live, I could not stop thinking about that. So I say that out loud to all the people there. And then, of course, he starts convulsing in the middle of the ring. And I'm just like, come on, dude. Like, I don't want to see this. Nobody wants to see this. But they used it for heat. And again, when you just watch a match where there's screwdrivers and kickouts at one of the most protected finishers of all time at one, I can sort of see why you may need to dial it up. A lot of people found that particular sell job by Danielson distasteful. And I even read some folks whose opinions I respect says, yeah, they kind of lost me for a second after that. Where did you fall with the convulsion?
I didn't like it. And I think it was another spot earlier in the show where someone was like doing a convulsion thing as well, because I distinctly remember them saying convulsion in another match.
Oh, it was I'll figure Kevin Kelly, I think, said somebody kicked out, but it wasn't them kicking out. It was actually them convulsing.
I think it was in the Suzuki match, right? Maybe it's like Sting or Darby or something.
I want to say it may have been Punk and Kojima, though. I don't really remember. I don't remember that much, but I remember the line. I don't remember that. Someone
you're exactly the same as me.
Someone in the chat is going to tell us what it was.
I felt the same way. So yeah, it didn't like. It took the match down a little bit for me. I would say that, and I think it took the crowd out of it a bit. And the crowd never really got fully into this match, and I think a lot of that had to do with that amazing match they saw just a half hour earlier. But I mean, that's not to say it wasn't a great match, because it just wasn't, like it didn't have the atmosphere. And I think maybe in a different situation, maybe if that match was first and the Kenny and Will was the main event, it might have had a different reaction and it might have been a better match. Who knows? We saw, I don't know if you saw the thing in the chat here that Matt posted, but
I'll add that after we finish talking.
Yeah, but
very interesting what he said.
Yeah, but so I mean, I didn't like it, and a lot of the people in our Discord didn't. I know our friend Mel, from Power Bombshells, who has a seizure disorder.
Yes,
she said it didn't bother her. So to me that means more than anybody else's opinion. I have a daughter with a seizure disorder. It didn't bother me. Like, it wasn't like I was offended. I was just, it's too real. Like, because I was worried that he really was. It reminded me of the Shawn Michaels Triple H match at SummerSlam.
Yeah, a couple people brought that up.
Yeah, but I mean, in that case, it was more like that was more realistic in terms, like that was more like a wrestling thing, whereas this was a little too close to real life. I thought the way Danielson did it in the Garcia match, where you remember when he passed out there, I thought that was perfect. Like that was, you could tell it was wrestling, you could tell it wasn't real, but it was believable enough. Whereas this was just, it was almost, I wouldn't say hokey, but almost like it was too much. That's all.
Okay, so Doc lets it go. Of course, this dude is convulsing. The Doc's like, looks good to me.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Danielson gets up, hits flying knee. It's another flying knee at some point. Hits the stomps on Okada. Okada at some point, it's another drop kick, Rainmaker. Danielson kicks out at 2. Okada goes for another Rainmaker. Danielson traps the arm in the label lock. But the story that Kevin Kelly is telling is that his right arm is hurt, so he can't quite lock it in, and they struggle. And then finally, Okada taps out. So maybe that was also part of the, not the frustration, but just the surprise in the tap out, was that Kevin Kelly, it was either Kevin Kelly or Excalibur, had told us about the right arm. So we were just thinking like, okay, this is just sort of a transition into the finisher. Now, while I wasn't surprised that Omega lost, I was surprised that Danielson won here. But if you think about it from the 50-50 booking, AEW loses that first main event, and then they come back and win that second main event. I don't know if that's how they thought about it, but I was legitimately surprised that Bryan Danielson won this match. Were you also surprised?
Yeah, because I just assumed that Danielson would be like fighting tooth and nail to put Okada over.
Yeah.
Just based on
because
history.
he never wins.
I wasn't like keeping track of, how many matches did AEW win, how many matches did New Japan win. Like, I honestly didn't care about that. Like, I was just so into the matches that never even occurred to me. But I definitely, like, I was expecting different results on both of these. I was expecting Omega to beat Ospreay, and I was expecting Okada to beat Danielson. So
yeah,
I suppose by that logic, I should have, as soon as one went the other way, I should have assumed the other. But watching the match, I just kept thinking, oh yeah, eventually Okada's going to come back, and Danielson's like the cocky heel, and you want to send the fans home happy and everything. And yeah, it just didn't happen. Although the fans seemed happy when it was over. Like, they got to hear Final Countdown again. And Danielson's such a nice guy. I mean, he's playing heel and everybody gets into it, but nobody really hates him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the great Matthew Burrell in our chat says that he was wearing a brace, and that Danielson thinks that his forearm is fractured. And I guess he was supposed to have a match on Wednesday. That is now canceled, and he says he is now out for 2 months. And Aiden said that Meltzer confirmed that he fractured it 10 minutes into the match. So I guess that match was almost 30 minutes, right? It was like 28.
28. That's the other thing I was going to say. Like, if you had asked me immediately after the match, how long was that match? I would have thought 15 minutes, and it was 28 minutes. Like, I mean, that's Okada, right? He could do an hour draw, and you'd think, oh yeah, that's 25 minutes. No.
And the match went by, and you're just interested in
2 months, so that puts him out of All In.
That does. Let's see, July. No, All In is I guess right around that time.
Yeah,
it'll be All In.
So
and maybe they just save him for All Out.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, I mean, I think if you had a choice between the two, you'd want him on All In, but who knows? Depends what they're going to do with him.
And All Out this year is going to be at the United Center. Previously,
he's definitely out of Blood and Guts.
If that's supposedly the Boston show, then he will, and maybe Tony's got to change some gears and change some of the plans and maybe bring in a surprise at that point. So all out is at the United Center, like we just said. What do you like? Have you been to previous All Ins?
No.
Okay.
I had tickets to the one in 2020, I think. Was that the first one? No, it's 2021. And I ended up having to sell them because I couldn't get across the border.
That's right. And that was the great All In show.
Yeah.
So
Brady Childs got my ticket.
I'm sorry, the great All Out show. So the going into that bigger building, it's not going to be an automatic sellout. I'm guessing they will sell out, because with Punk back, I think and a big pay-per-view, they will probably sell out that show, especially if, I don't know, I sort of feel like he's next for MJF. I know a lot of people want to see Cole, and I'm like, I think Cole's kind of got to move aside for Punk. It just seems like that's the booking.
Maybe they could do a TV match.
Yeah, as much as I know people are a little frustrated with the man, and I get that, but it just seems
Cole's injured too. I mean, I don't know. Well, not injured, but ill. I don't know how long he's gonna be out, but he missed this show.
Yeah. So yeah, really, I think that's a strong move. I guess the Now Arena will have Dynamite, and then Collision and
Yeah,
All Out will be at
which
United
is
Center. I don't know.
interesting.
I
They
would have
moved.
probably done Collision at Now Arena as well, just to make sure
Yeah,
that I could sell those tickets.
it's interesting that they moved All Out from the original from their home, because they're usually at the Now Center, and
Yeah,
they're going to do the United Center. So they might, that has to be Punk MJF that they have in mind if
yeah,
they
I
think
would
they're
think
going to
so.
sell out the United. And I mean, that seems to be what they're heading towards, and that's why Punk got a big win tonight. That's why MJF got a win. That's why, you know, he's got his little red bag with the belt. And yeah, I think that's a big match. I think that's the biggest match they have right now. I think.
I think so too. I mean, as
Yeah.
long as we're talking AEW, that
Yes, 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 yeah, yeah.
Omega and Ospreay is probably, but that's going to be at a different time.
Or either one of them against MJF, honestly. You know, so maybe Omega MJF is actually a bigger match, maybe, but I think they're a long way from doing that.
I think I don't even know if they're going to get there.
It's
I
possible.
wonder if Omega is the guy who eventually beats Punk. And we're fantasy booking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Too much in the forward. Okay, anything in the pre-show that caught your eye? Because I thought the way that when people came over, I got to see the entire pre-show, and they said, "How's the pre-show?" And I said,
Eh.
"It was like Rampage. It was like a good Rampage."
That's a very good way to put it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it kind of built. You know, the matches kind of kept getting better as they went on. The best one was the, you know, quote unquote main event, Lij against United Empire. A couple points I thought were interesting. El Desperado, there's like 15 members of Chaos, and El Desperado's in Suzuki's group. I don't even know what they're, I can't even remember what their Strong Style, I think is the name.
He was begrudgingly.
Yeah, he was
part
just
of that
like
group.
randomly put in this match. Stu Grayson, I had no idea he was a heel. The last time I saw him was he was wrestling in Winnipeg, and he was in a match with like the Bucks and I think Kenny, and he was like the most over babyface in the match, and now he's a heel and getting no reaction in Canada. I'm just like, wow, okay. And then yeah, I thought Billy Starks had a, you know, a pretty fun match with Athena. You know, she did her job, and she did good. It wasn't, I actually thought the Jade match that she had on TV was a little bit better, but I really like Athena, and I missed her. I hadn't seen her since I think the ROH pay-per-view was the last time I saw her wrestle. So I was glad to see her. I don't watch ROH, the streaming service. I'm not paying $10 a month for Dark.
You're the historian.
I am, and I still watch classic ROH, literally like every week. But and I watch the pay-per-views. I just, like I said, I don't want to pay $10 a month to watch Dark and Elevation.
All right. So let's talk about the main show, the opener. Now, you felt a certain way about Swerve and Tanahashi, and I loved your perspective about Tanahashi, but then, and so I read your perspective about Tanahashi before I even watched the match.
Okay.
And I was thinking, I was like, you know what? I almost always really enjoy Tanahashi matches, so I'll probably feel similar to Paul. And then when I watched it, I thought, oh man, he's moving like I move, like maybe even worse than I move. And I was like, this is not good. And after I watched the match and he won, and I thought, okay, he's saving himself for this pay-per-view. That was not really correct. I think he was a little bit better in the pay-per-view, the match with MJF, than he was with Swerve. But at the same time, when he is moving so slowly and so unathletically, as someone who doesn't really know who Tanahashi is, actually, the probably not very many people watching didn't know Tanahashi. But if you're looking at this as like sort of athletic entertainment, sports entertainment, there's an athleticism involved in this. You're watching it going like, there's no way the young, jacked AEW champion is losing to this old man. And that was the problem with that match, is if you just kind of pulled back a little bit, you go, okay, this guy is great. Tanahashi was great. Tanahashi's not winning. So I don't think any of the near falls really worked all that well. I commend Tanahashi for going out there, for doing his job. MJF won with the ring, so they protected Tanahashi a little bit. Tanahashi is still the legend. And I just look at this as like, this is really great for MJF's resume. He got to beat Hiroshi Tanahashi, who is twice his age at this point and is an all-time legend. And, this is the swan song part of Tanahashi's career. But in saying that, knowing how much you liked that first match with Swerve, what did you think of this match?
Okay. First off, I am not going to pretend that Tanahashi is even close to what he used to be athletically. He's clearly lost, a step,
Even just even just like 3 years ago.
Yeah,
Tanahashi.
I mean, I don't know how old he is, 45, 46.
I think Dave said 46 or 47.
Okay, so there you go. And he's working a tough schedule.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen him wrestle 24 times this year, and I haven't seen all of his matches. So excuse me, my neck is just bugging me here. I'm like Tanahashi.
Yeah, me and you are just like Tanahashi. My knees,
exactly.
your neck. Jeez.
Yeah. But I will say, like, because maybe, because of the fact that he doesn't have what he used to have athletically, he makes up for it in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I thought I really liked the match on Collision. I think it was Collision, right?
Yes.
Because of Kevin Kelly's job of putting over the fact that, okay, Tanahashi is not what he used to be, doesn't have a lot left, but what he lacks in athletic ability, he makes up for in guile and fighting spirit. And so he's going to give everything he has to try to get a win. And Swerve did a great job as well.
Yeah.
Because Swerve, like the one spot where he fell off the turnbuckles, and the funny thing is everyone's like, oh my God, Tanahashi shouldn't be out there. He's falling off turnbuckles and blah, blah, blah. They should have said this on Collision, but they really said it tonight. Like, these are different turnbuckles. Like, he's not used to standing on top of like that small turnbuckle. He's used to that big, wide New Japan turnbuckle. So that was probably actually part of the problem, right? And then when he did the dive, he kind of fell off, as opposed to like jumping. Whereas like on tonight's match, he actually did a pretty good dive. MJF got his knees up and everything, and he took a good bump. I did definitely thought Tanahashi was good tonight. I mean, I know what I'm like after a flight to Vegas. I can't imagine what Tanahashi's like after a flight from Japan, and I don't know when he got in, but I assume it was after Wednesday. So, at best he's working off, probably 24 hours of jet lag and and that just sitting in that cramped seat on a plane. Like, so I thought, this was the best you're going to get almost out of Tanahashi. I saw him have a better match with Will Ospreay at Resurgence a couple months ago, or maybe like 6 weeks ago. But this was pretty not far off of that match, and MJF did a great job.
The poor guy Tanahashi is going to be so beat up after the
G1. My God, he's got to do the G1. Like, I hope that somehow maybe like he just he tweaked his knee or something. And
here's another part of the psychology that I didn't even really think about, but Andy, who's checking us out live, said he thinks that the match didn't get a reaction because the storyline going into it is that MJF didn't care about the match. He thinks New Japan is an indie,
a rinky-dink indie fan.
And so, if you're not selling your opponent, if you're not, this is kind of anti-promotion from what we understand pro wrestling to be. MJF is this giant star. He's kind of just poo-pooing this opponent. So that could also be. I like that. I like that.
Well, and the thing is, so you do that story. He's calling him old and he's adjust your hearing aid and all this stuff, and then he goes out there and he has a match where he looks old. And so you're like, but he still won. So like as a fan, you're like, okay, he doesn't have much, but maybe, just maybe, he could be. You compared it to Mike Tyson and Larry Holmes.
Yeah, like the new champion versus the guy from 5 years prior.
I got another one for you. What about Rocky Balboa and Tommy Gunn?
Well, they never fought. So, except in the street, they fought in the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I always keep thinking he fought Antonio Tarver or whatever that guy's name was in Rocky Balboa, but he never actually fought in that one either.
No, he did.
Did
He
he?
did. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
They
So there.
fought in an exhibition.
Well, there's a better one then.
Yeah.
You know. Um,
Against Mason the Line Dixon.
yeah, that was played by Antonio Tarver.
Played
right?
by Antonio Tarver.
Yeah. So yeah, I know you're a big Rocky guy, and I even compared it to Ricky Steamboat and Chris Jericho.
Jericho.
At WrestleMania.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, because I mean,
And you know what's interesting about that comparison? Ricky the Dragon, at how old was he at that point?
it's like
He had to have been like
56.
50 something, right?
Yeah.
I feel like he moved a little bit better than Tanahashi moved tonight.
Well, sure, but he hadn't wrestled in 19
Yeah,
years.
obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Kevin Ely made a great comparison. He compared him to Chris Jericho, even like a few years ago when he went to Japan and wrestling Kenny Omega and Tetsuya Naito and all that. And, and he was actually older than Tanahashi is now, but again, he didn't wrestle the schedule that Tanahashi wrestled.
Yep.
So, but I thought that was a really good comparison. And if you really watch Jericho's matches, he doesn't do the kind of things that Tanahashi tries to do. He's such a smart worker. Like, and he'll beat himself up and he'll get bloody and everything, but he's not doing like moonsaults and dives and, like all the stuff Tanahashi's trying to do.
Yes. So, I mean, when he does the lion salt, I still hold my breath.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh no. Were you with MJF's title run? I know a lot of people believe that if he was as hot as AEW wants us to believe he is, they would have been able to sustain the loss of Punk and some of the things that happened a little bit better than they did. I have done not a 180 because I didn't think the title reign was necessarily a failure, but I sort of thought, like, if he was as hot as they want us to think he is, they would have turned this thing around. But at the same time, I was like, man, there's been so much negativity around the Punk thing and the Elite thing. And this guy's just out there performing his ass off. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, this is not going to be his only run. Obviously, he's going to have multiple runs down the line, whether it's here or WWE.
Yeah.
I would say this is a very positive run for him. He is a much better wrestler than most people give him credit for. As a character, some of the stuff can be hit or miss. He's a great talker, but I just have so much higher of an opinion of him than I did, even a year ago.
I've always been a big MJF guy, and I've always said that he was much better in the ring than people give him credit for. I famously remember a show that you did with Oliver Kopp previewing a pay-per-view, and he said, "Oh, I wonder about MJF's in-ring ability," and I gave him hell for that. And I'm like, "You wait." And then apparently, like MJF, I don't know if he heard the interview, heard it because I think you did it on Wrestling Observer. Like
I did do it on the YouTube.
I think he heard it, and he literally I made the joke that he wanted to prove a point, and then Oliver sent me a message, and he's like, "You were right." Like like he had heard that and he went out there. I think he was a Jungle Boy or something. Like and they had a great match on a pay-per-view and and it was so I'm a big MJF guy and I think this title reign has been really good. I think in the ring, obviously, business-wise, I think he's going to end up being one of the most successful champions they've had when all's said and done, especially if they do get to the Punk match. I think that's going to be real big. I think tonight was big, but, he's not going to get the credit, obviously, and he doesn't probably deserve it. But, it's a pay-per-view with him as champion, and, it's at some point it's going to go on his record. I think Danielson, Okada, and Omega Ospreay get the credit for this one, but, and I think this show's probably did really, really well. We'll find out in a few weeks, I'm sure.
I have been on the record as saying that this CM Punk versus Kojima match should have been promoted a lot better than it was. Mm-hmm. It was just an afterthought. And I get it. It's not the top match on this show, but to me, he's the biggest star in the company, or at least the one that you're pushing the biggest right now. This should have been a little bit more, but it's Kojima and we kind of knew what we were going to get with this match. I thought this match over-delivered. It got to a gear that I didn't think that they were going to get to, and Kojima was fantastic at this match.
You remember the match he had with Moxley?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, was that a TV match?
No, I think it was on pay-per-view. Or if it wasn't pay-per-view, it was like the go home for a pay-per-view. But
okay,
yeah.
So Punk the detractors, the Punk detractors, the one thing that they could say is he's kind of rusty in the ring. He hasn't wrestled in a while. He's coming off of an injury. He's a little bit older. I get that part. My stance with him is, I personally, who knows? Like, I understand why people don't like him.
Yeah,
I completely get it. I understand that completely. And trying to watch him with an unbiased viewpoint, he's got the tricks. He understands how to get the crowd to react to him. He's doing Hogan stuff in the ring. And yet the guy who is probably, I don't know, what is Kojima, 10 years older than him or something like that? Whatever it is.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
That was the true legend who knew all the tricks in the ring tonight. And I thought Punk was good. I thought Kojima was awesome in this match. Except with one exception of the elbow drop to the balls. That looked a little rough for CM Punk.
He's 52. I thought he was older. He's the same age as me. A lot better athlete than I am. Yeah, I love this match. I thought it was maybe like the third best match in the show, third or fourth. And I was very surprised that CM Punk did, like, I don't know how long the match was, 18 minutes. And
yeah,
he did everything. He took those chops, which I was like waiting for, and then more, like even better. And he leaned into the booze, which I really liked. He didn't try to fight it.
Except after the match was over. Then he turned babyface after the match.
Yeah, kind of. But I think he knows he's about to get booed for the next couple weeks.
Oh yeah.
Because they're and I mean probably beyond that. Like
I mean, how many shows can they just make in Chicago just so he can cheer?
Well, there's you know what? Like, I'm sure Tony's gonna book as many as he can. But it's an interesting. I know Dave compares it to Cena. I don't really see that, because the difference there was
Cena never
was
turned heel. Like
Cena's
the ultimate babyface in real life.
And I think Punk actually wants to be a heel. So it's probably more like Bret Hart and Stone Cold, from that stuff you just covered not that long ago. So in that sense, and I think, especially Punk, Bret Hart's his hero. Like, he's probably, watching that stuff and, okay, here's what I do. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I was so pleasantly surprised by this match. And honestly, like, it's kind of hoping we get a little bit of MJF and him. Like, Kevin had a great idea, having them maybe like pass each other on the ramp as they were, one was leaving.
WWE used to do that stuff on the branded shows very well. I was kind of interested to see if we would get any of that, but
none of it.
Not yet.
I'm not even sure
do that.
I'm not even sure if the Elite and Punk were in the building at the same time. They left enough matches between their shows that they could have probably avoided.
I think somebody said that Sean said that they were just kept apart on like different sides of the building.
It's just ridiculous. Bunch
crazy
of children.
The wounds are still fresh. They gotta.
I know.
They gotta figure out how to mend that a little bit.
Kojima is but I vote for him for the Hall of Fame every year. I'm not sure if he made it yet. If he's still on the ballot, I'll vote for him again next year. Him and Tenzon. I'm a big fan. I've been a big fan of his and Tenzon. Well, not so much Tenzon now, but back in the day. So
all right, let's.
I wanted to say, did you catch Kojima's line building this up on the thing?
He said he wanted to kill him.
Yeah, I'm going to kill you, you idiot. That's all the promotion I needed.
So CM Punk did win this match. He hit a GTS maybe to the stomach. I don't know if he actually hit his head, but he did finally win the match. We'll go through some of these other matches pretty quickly. We've already been talking for a little while. Cassidy, Shibata, Daniel Garcia, Zack Sabre Jr. I think you like this a lot more than I did. I will say, and I'm going to caveat this by saying, I don't often like the multi-man matches as much because the spots to me are so convoluted and so choreographed, because they're just like every 4-person match you've ever seen in the way that you get to certain things. So that being said, God, Cassidy's over, man. He is over like Rover. And whether you enjoy the shtick, and he's pulled the shtick back a lot. He used to do way more of the shtick early in the AEW days. He doesn't do as much now. He's a fighting babyface. I've said this time and time again. He's the best booked babyface in the entire company, and he wins. Shibata, I think he hit Garcia with the PK, and then Orange pushed him out, and then Orange got a crucifix on Garcia. But seeing Zack Sabre Jr. and Shibata in a match together always going to be great. And kudos to Orange. Like he is a made star for them. And I told this story in the Discord, but I'll tell it here now. My stepdaughter's 8. I was watching Rampage, and she heard the name Orange Cassidy, and she goes, "Oh, I know him." And I was like, "How?" Like, the only wrestler she knows is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. That's the only one that she knows. She goes, "I know him." And I was like, I don't understand. She's like, "Oh yeah." And you know who else? Chuck Taylor. And I was like, "What?" This is like that's like my enemy. And I'm joking. I'm not the biggest Chuck Taylor fan. People
sexy Chucky T.
People give me some crap for that. But and she said, well, there's this show on Netflix called The Floor is the Lava, or The Lava's the Floor, or something like that. And she said, Orange Cassidy's on it, and Chuck Taylor was on it. And she said, and there was a girl on it too, and it's Statlander. Chris Statlander is also on it. So that just goes to show you like how wide the Netflix reach is to reach the 8-year-old demographic there who has no idea of what pro wrestling even is. And so I thought that was pretty cool. It's like, you know what? John and I on the Fight Game podcast have been critics of Cassidy. A lot of it is for the shtick, but I think if people who've listened to that show hear my criticism being less and less and less, I enjoy the guy. I think he's really good. There are some things sometimes, he can do some things that I kind of roll my eyes at, but they got a star, and it's fantastic to see that homegrown star come out of this show, and he's in a match with freaking Shibata and Zack Sabre Jr. and he's getting the Duke. And at that point, I don't even go, this is so like, I'm like, yeah, I get it. He's the guy. Great.
All right.
But I know you like this match better than me, but go ahead.
Okay. So we're going to find out if we have any fans of the Dynamite show in the chat here right now, because I got 7 words for you.
Okay.
And I'll start it. Orange Cassidy should, let's see if they can finish this sentence.
I know where we're going here.
We're going here. He should never lose this belt. Ever, ever, ever. It's so perfect. I mean, obviously he's getting at some point.
Now here's a real question.
Yeah.
Because I've heard people say this. Could you ever see him winning the AEW World Title?
No. And that's nothing against Orange Cassidy. But you had he's like 37.
Yeah, he's a little older.
And you a little while ago you were asking people to like map out, the future champions.
Yeah,
and,
who's the next 3 titles?
Yeah, and I mean, and then you get some names, and then you've got some guys that like MJF and Hangman that have won it before that are probably going to win it again. You got guys that you didn't even mention like Adam Cole, Ricky Starks. Like there's guys that Swerve. Even like some people would say Keith Lee. I don't think he's gonna ever get there, but and then there's guys that they might bring in, from WWE, from New Japan, like Jay White. So I just think there's a lot of guys ahead of him. That said, the AEW title is a pretty prestigious title, and if he's already taken the international title to be the second most valuable title in the company. When he won the title, it was a joke. I used to call it Pac's wacky title. It was the Mid-Atlantic Continental, whatever the hell they called it. And he's made this a prestigious title, and he's defending it every week, and he's having great matches, and just freaking keep doing it. You know what? Look at WWE, and Gunther with the Intercontinental title, like that's a prestigious belt. I put that ahead of Seth's belt. I wouldn't put it ahead of Roman's. In this case,
that was another exercise we did on the Fight Game podcast about what are the most valuable titles.
I'm sure there are people in fans, people maybe even in this chat that would actually have Orange Cassidy ahead of MJF at this point. Just because of the fact that he's defended this title so many times, he's a fighting champion. Jeremy probably thinks that. And I'm not
Jeremy's
slamming,
sleeping, dude. He's not watching
I'm
this.
not slamming Jeremy. Like Jeremy does a great show and he's got great wrestling opinions. But I just think he's in the perfect position. And I think he can keep this position. When he eventually loses this belt, maybe he wins the 6-man titles, or maybe he wins a TNT belt or something. But I think now the interesting one is I've seen people even calling for him for the Hall of Fame. And I mean, I don't see that ever. But
well, Dave still wants to do that show.
I know.
We'll do that show soon.
I don't know if I'll bring that up on the Observer show, but we'll see.
If you want to see Dave get angry,
well, I'll bring it up. Just
okay, so the next match is probably the biggest disappointment, though. I was a little hard on the build of this match, which is Jungle Boy and Sonata. I didn't like the matchup itself. I didn't like the idea of Jungle Boy losing at Double or Nothing, and then propping himself back up as the the person who's challenging Sonata, who said, "Hey, open door challenge." So, this match started, kind of got going, finished. People said, "What? What just happened?"
Literally, that was,
and it was all about the angle afterward. So Jungle Boy loses. Sonata does the swinging skull end, a poison rana, a shining wizard, and then a moonsault. And I think people still kind of expected Jungle Boy to kick out, and he didn't. And the crowd was stunned. Sonata wins the match, and it's not about him because Hook, who was ringside with Jungle Boy, is trying to make Jungle Boy feel a little better about himself. Did not have this fantastic match, didn't have a great showing against the IWGP champion. Raises Jungle Boy's hand in front of the crowd, the two baby faces together, Jungle Hook. And then Jungle Boy turns on him with a clothesline. Taz is doing commentary. It's very angry. And the whole bit is about, Jungle Boy being turning heel. Yeah. And so I was disappointed in the match. Who knows about the Jungle Boy heel turn? I think we've been expecting it now for months and months and months, and they finally did it. What did they do it well? I'm still not sure. He looked so unimpressive in that match as a contender that I was like, oh, the mid-carder turned heel. The mid-carder who was trying to prop himself up to be a champion turned heel. And again, I'm going to preface this by saying, I love this kid. Like, I almost feel like a kinship towards him because of who his pops was and how big of a fan I was of his pop. So I'm always rooting for this guy. I wasn't that into this heel turn. So what did you think about this?
I think he's going to be a good heel. But I don't understand the motivation of the character of why he would turn on Hook. Like there's like, they didn't do anything to lead you in that direction. Other than the fact that when Jungle Boy said, "Oh, you're my best friend," in that interview, it's like, oh, okay, that's keyword for I'm about to turn on you. I think I said on the Dynamite show, they should have just put subtitles on the screen. Like, I'm about to turn on you, Hook or whatever his real name is. But so this happens, and then like you could have had something, like you could have had him asking, like Hook to like hit him with the belt or something, and then he doesn't do it. Like, just something, but there was nothing. There's no reason for him to turn. He just did it. And then I think the motivation might be, and here I'm just making things up, but it might be the fact that he's just jealous that he has a belt, based on the story, and he's going to, and that's going to be his thing. Like, he vowed to win a belt, so he's going to get this worthless title that's never defended.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to be any better off. I was, what I really wanted to happen after he turned on him, I thought they should have had Christian walk out with his arms open, and then Jungle Boy just goes and gives him a big hug. And then it's like, in the fans in Canada, after he healed on them the night before, like, I thought that might have really gotten over. And then it's like, you're kind of putting him under Christian, but maybe that's where he needs to be. but I guess like right now he's just going to be on his own as a heel, and in AEW especially, like you need a stable.
Yeah.
Like you can't be by yourself. MJF's the exception that proves the rule, but
yeah. It doesn't seem natural to Jungle Boy, but maybe being a heel actually helps him be a better baby face. That could be part of the calculus.
He's gonna have to get new music.
Get new music.
Yeah.
He was making fun of the little arm movements for his own music at the end there.
I think he's gonna be a good heel. Like there's something about him, especially I think if he hooks up with Anna Jay on screen, I think that'll really. It might have like a Sammy Ty thing going on there, like where
that might not be good for her though.
Well, I think she's kind of dead in the water anyways. They killed her finisher, like, twice now. People have just like no-sold it. So, maybe you put him in the Jericho Appreciation side, or maybe you just break them off. But I think they've got this thing where people are going to be jealous of him for having the hot girl, and they're not going to like her. And so, yeah, they can just do that. But I think eventually he probably needs a manager. Definitely needs a manager.
All right, a few more matches here, and I really appreciate all the people who are hanging out with us. And you know what I realize is, even though this is Sunday and people got to go to work tomorrow, I think people are pretty buzzed. They're pretty jazzed about the show. So you just have this,
especially drinking this whiskey and Crown.
Really, I had the Kentucky's Best, which is the Trader Joe's bourbon. And my buddy and I, we only use this Trader Joe's bourbon as a mixer. Like if we're to drink bourbon, we'll buy other stuff. But so I had my new bottle of Kentucky's Best bourbon, and I just had a Coke Zero. So that's
in honor of Chuck Taylor.
There you go. All right. So the last three matches here that we're going to talk about: Eddie Kingston, Ishii, the Elite, versus Blackpool Combat Club, Takeshita, and Shota Umino. This match was a lot of fun. Now, again, when I watch these multi-man tags, the 10-man tags, I know that there's going to be a lot of stuff that is going to be very calculated to get to certain spots, and all of a sudden everyone's going to be in the ring, and then it's only going to be two people in the ring. Then everyone's going to be in the ring, and then there's going to be two people in the ring. You have to be okay with that kind of stuff in order to appreciate these matches. These guys are better than good. Like all 10 of these guys are just incredible pro wrestlers. So they made it work to where I wasn't like, that's kind of cheesy or whatever. So I really like this match. The story was multiple stories going on. Eddie Kingston hates Claudio. Every time they were near each other, they were fighting. Like they were just looking for each other. There was Moxley and Eddie Kingston did a lot of chopping, but they weren't doing that thing where you cross the line, right? Like nobody all of a sudden threw a knee to the groin to get the upper hand. It was all sort of kind of fair stuff with each other. So it's really interesting to see where they go there. Shota Umino and Takeshita as a tag team was actually really cool. They were doing spots together, kind of like partners. This is interesting, and I wanted to ask you about this because I did so many podcasts last week. I don't even remember who I was asking this. The Young Bucks, don't they seem a little bit too under the rate, like too not important in their own company? I felt that way in this match too, almost like they're not that important when they should be two of the biggest stars in the entire company. I just felt like they're just under the radar. They're just kind of skating by. And that may be because of other reasons that we don't know about. But I just felt, again, there's something going on here. I don't know why they're not a much bigger part of this TV show and this company right now.
Well, I mean, even to the point where you had two brother tag teams fighting over who the best brother team in the company is. And meanwhile, these guys are like, hello. I think actually, like, I might be wrong about this, but I don't even think they actually legally tagged into the match at all. They were involved. I mean, they were doing stuff and everything, but they were just kind of there, and they did a couple spots. I honestly can't remember. I remember Hangman doing a lot.
I thought he looked
Um,
great in this match, though.
yeah,
He may have knocked maybe hit a little too hard in certain
yeah, yeah,
times.
yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever.
I think that was just to scare Punk.
Yeah.
He's like,
I
"See,
mean,
sucker,
but on
this is
his
what's gonna
team
happen."
Kingston stood out for sure. Ishii, I mean, was, just, I mean, he got the win, right?
Yeah,
And he was, he was outstanding. Like, there's so many matches coming out of this that I wanted to see. And none of them involved the Bucks.
yeah,
And honestly, like, depending on your tastes, some people might say they're the best. They were the best two. They're the best two workers in this match, and they were barely a factor.
yeah.
Which is weird.
They were like a side
Um,
angle to the whole thing, a side
are they
piece
being
to the whole match.
downplayed? Are they hurt? I know Matt had that injury. I think it was Matt, right? Or is it Nick? No, I think it was Matt.
Matt
Had that
had a bicep
injury.
injury.
Yeah, and we haven't seen a ton of them. So, it's possible that they're still hurt, or, who knows? Maybe they're just saving themselves. I don't know. But I mean, the match wasn't hurt by it. I agree with Matt. I thought it was the second best match on the show. Definitely my second favorite match on the show. And maybe the second best as well. At the time this match was over, I was even thinking, like, it's gonna be hard to top this as my favorite. I just was really into this match.
Yeah,
And all the things I want to see Takeshita and Ishii. I want to see Takeshita and Kingston. I want to see Ishii against anybody. He's my favorite wrestler. And then Mox and Kingston. I mean, we got just a taste. And yeah, this was great. And we barely saw Claudio in the match that I can remember. Wheeler, he was a little shithead, like he always is.
He took the pin. He took the
Yeah.
brain buster, which is
And I think that people were surprised at that. Like, I was expecting, it almost looked like the Bucks were supposed to break it up and they missed it. Like, I don't know if that was just selling or what, but it was really good because you saw them in the corner and you figured, oh yeah, they're going to break it up, and then they didn't. And then, it was just, oh, the match is over. Okay, cool.
And Eddie is headed to the G1, so he's the one person from this company who will be in G1, and I'm excited to see him. I want to see him in the bracket that he's in, and I'm very interested to see his matches. So good for Eddie.
Him and Ishii are gonna have a match.
Yeah, no, that'll be tremendous.
Yeah.
One of the more underrated matches on the card, Willow and Toni Storm. Now, I thought Willow had a really good match with Nyla Rose. Impressive in the sense of we are building Willow for bigger things. I thought she had a better match with Nyla than Chris Statlander had not a couple weeks ago. I thought it was better. Willow also, I think she just really understands her character very well, and it showed out in this match. Like, she was really fired up on the show, and you can see the difference now. We go back to Billy Starks. Billy Starks, very young, probably the first time ever in front of a crowd like this. There was a couple of moments where you could tell, like, oh, like she's a little nervous or whatever. And in in certain moments as the baby face to fire up, like she got to like maybe a 5 out of 10. Willow got to like a 10 out of 10 on firing up on stuff. So I thought she was a really good baby face in this match. Toni Storm wins in a very heelish way. Referee kind of gets entangled with the two of them. Referee gets pushed out of the way, and then Toni rakes the eyes, and then it hits her little quick pile driver to win the match. But I'm just impressed. This is a few really strong Willow performances in a row, and it made me wonder if Tony Khan is thinking her for the Owen, which would be, it would be a nice thing for her to win the Owen and a little bit of an upward trajectory for her.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. I think she's already in the semifinals, right? She beat Nyla. When you say a couple in a row, like so one of the observations I had was I thought this match was so much better than the match she had with Nyla. I wasn't really impressed with that match. I don't exactly know why. I think maybe it was just, they're a little too similar, and just the style and everything. But this match was great. And these women were in the hardest spot on the show, I think. You would maybe say that
following that crazy tag.
Yeah, because you might say following Will and Kenny was the hardest, but you know what? It was Sting. and it was Jericho and it was Suzuki. Like,
Yeah.
like they have that fail safe, that, whereas this, they had nothing. And there wasn't much of a build to this match. It was just kind of announced. And they, they went out there and they won that crowd over. The crowd was into the match by the end of it. And that's, and you've been talking about Willow, and I want to talk about Tony, because I thought Tony is really finding herself as this heel character.
She's so great in the role. She's a really, really strong champion.
She is. And the women at ringside play their role to perfection. Saraya is underrated as this just heel manager that is, you want to hit her.
I love the Outcasts. I know a lot of people don't like them because they're ex-WWE. I love the Outcasts. I think they do a great job in their role of just heat.
Absolutely. Like Saraya, when she, when one of them has the ref distracted and then she gets her licks in. And the only down thing I would say is, it is a little bit of stupid babyface syndrome that she doesn't have any friends with her, because that they're going to be there. But and Sky Blue was backstage watching, like, maybe bring her out. Although I don't know what Sky Blue is going to do to Saraya and Ruby, but they should bring a kendo stick or something. But yeah, no, I really like this, and I do think I like your idea of having her win the Owen, because I don't really see anyone else as. I mean, I suppose you could have Britt win it 2 years in a row, but that's kind of boring.
What do you think about Britt not really being a focus right now?
I don't know. Maybe she's hurt. Maybe
we don't know.
Yeah, like I think she's hurt by the fact that Jamie's hurt. Is probably the biggest thing. Yeah. So you kind of have to downplay her a little bit. But now that Forbidden Door's over and we're into the Owen, I think you got to at least have her in the finals. She's the defending champion and all that. And so we'll see what happens. And I don't know, I don't know if she's ill too, maybe, because she was at that meeting or that signing with her boyfriend. So it's possible.
Yeah, they were at the Nintendo thing. And
yeah, it's possible they were both hurt. I don't know.
Or ill or whatever.
Or ill, yeah.
The only match we haven't talked about was Minoru Suzuki
gods.
Minoru Suzuki, Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara against Naito, Darby Allin, and Sting. This match was very rough in spots, and I wanted to get your thoughts on something. There's a moment in this match where Guevara and Jericho are not on the same page. Jericho brings out the table, the only table that they used in the night, from what I can remember. Pulls it out, puts Sting on the table, and tells Guevara to do the off the top rope into the table. Guevara doesn't want to do it, and Sting's laying there for a little while. Like he was rammed into the barricade, and so he's on this table. Guevara's like, no. So everything Guevara does is super fast. Like, he's just an explosive athlete. So he does his move. And the way Sting takes it made me wonder if Sting was supposed to get out of the way. And the reason I say that is he was on his feet in the next spot. And so I wonder if you thought the same thing. Was Sting supposed to move out of the way and Guevara supposed to crash and burn? What was supposed to happen here?
I'll be honest, like, I didn't really think that, but something seemed off. And so that's probably it. And it just didn't occur to me. I was more focused on the fact that I could hear someone on camera saying, "Oh my God, Sammy, are you okay?" And it was it sounded like a female voice. And I thought it was Aubrey, but apparently it was like the two little kids at ringside that Will Ospreay had been heckling in the match before. So I was just like focused on that. But I mean, there was that spot, and he seemed like he hit him like pretty like hard.
Yeah.
And then it was like just before that, there was another spot where he was like making a save and he just clocked Sting. Like,
so Sting had the Scorpion Deathlock. I think it was on Jericho.
Yeah.
And Sammy Guevara jumped from the top rope backwards so that he could hit a cutter. He actually reached Sting, but Sting didn't actually take the bump.
Yeah.
So he didn't bend down far enough or whatever. And they started grabbing his head. I didn't think that Guevara actually hit him on the head. I think he was just trying to sell what he was supposed to sell, even if we didn't see him actually hit the
Yeah.
mat. So there was some confusion there. And so after this spot, Sting's going into the ring and he's dealing with Suzuki and Naito. He steps from outside the ring to inside the ring. And it was like, oh, that wasn't the right timing. Then he steps back outside the ring, then inside the ring again to
And the
help with
announcers are like just basically selling it like he's superhuman.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like, oh my God, he just took that bump and now he's up. Like, wow, look at Sting.
So Naito wins. He pins Suzuki.
Yeah.
That match, I think they had some ideas on doing stuff, and it didn't necessarily work in their favor. It was a charisma, star power match, anyways. It didn't need to be this like
We got
great
the
match.
Lasuki Gods pose.
We got the
you know?
pose.
Yeah.
But here's my question, and we saw this not too long ago. It was a few weeks ago when Sting was working with the Embassy. I think it was also an 8-man tag. And they had him doing all these spots, and this poor brother can't remember what's going on. He's like, what am I supposed to do? Like, can we make it easier for this guy? He's a friggin' legend. Why is he doing all these random spots with these guys?
I will say in that first match, I remember hearing you and John talking about it and thinking, oh, wow, okay. I didn't really notice a lot of that. And I remember just like watching the match and thinking it was a lot of fun just because it was so fast paced. And it felt like they had a 15-minute match that they had a cut time and they were told, okay, you got 6 minutes now. And we're just going to do the same match. Whereas this time, this was like the first time I think that I've seen Sting in AEW where I thought, okay, he looks like maybe he shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna say he's washed or shot or anything. It wasn't that. It was just he just looked like he didn't belong, and it's unfortunate. They did have the one cool spot where he went off with Jericho, and I think hopefully we'll get that match. I think Jericho can have a really good match with him. You know, just a singles match, just a simple match, like you said. You know, don't give him too much to do. Just I thought we were going to get the Flair Sting spots, but we didn't really get much of that. We just got the sharpshooter or the Scorpion Deathlock.
I mean, it definitely looked like the match was there to create a little bit of interest. So I think they did an angle or something at the scrum. I saw some photos, but I didn't see any of the actual scrum. All right, last thing I just wanted to ask you before we get out of here.
Yes.
Again, thanks to everyone who's checking in with us live. The announcing, the pre-show or the 0 hour had Kevin Kelly, Excalibur, and Chris Charlton, who was in a tux, and you know they're all dressed to the nines. They're looking ever so professional, and then you got this dude in a mask. That I know people love Excalibur. I still think it's a little weird, but then when we do the regular show. You had Kevin Kelly, you had Excalibur, and then you had Tony and Taz, and then Taz had, I think he left after his son got beat up.
Everything, yeah.
For me, I get why Tony's there. I sort of understand why Taz is there, but I think they're kind of they duplicate each other a little bit. So in a 3-man, I would have rather had the 3-man than the 4-man. But I was just thinking. The announcing on this match would have been perfect. If it was just Kevin and Excalibur.
Yeah. So when before the show, I think it was Matthew Burrill in our Discord had asked, you know, who do people think are going to be the commentators on this show? And I said, oh, I think it's going to be Excalibur, Kevin, and Taz. And then the show opened, and it was Chris Charlton, as you mentioned, on the pre-show. And I thought that team was really good. The only criticism I would have, and I've heard Chris Charlton on New Japan. I watch a lot of New Japan, and he doesn't talk as much on New Japan as he did here. I don't know why they did that, but it was a choice. And it almost seemed like by the end of the pre-show, he was talking less. So maybe like someone got in his ear and said, hey, you know, let the other guys talk.
Or he just knew he only had he was only going to be on there for an hour. So
that could be. Yeah. He's just trying to get his shit in. And then when the main show started, it was the team I thought it was. I didn't even realize Tony was out there. I thought that Tony came in when Taz left. So Tony, like, I don't think it, like, you barely noticed him. So, I mean, for that thing, maybe he didn't even need to be there. Because I remember thinking at one, like, I actually almost typed the comment into the Discord when Taz left, it was like, oh, this is so much better with just the two of them. And then I heard Tony, and it's like, oh, he's there too. Okay, like I didn't even notice him. There was a few points when I noticed him. I think, the Will Ospreay match, he was just like overreacting to everything, and because he's a fan, right?
Yeah.
And I even went on Twitter and I said, I think he's gonna have a cornery by the end of this match.
There was also a moment where somebody did an eye rake, and he's like, "Oh, I'm totally fine with an eye rake. You get the advantage." And then when I think Omega's head got rammed into the announcer's table, he's like, "Oh my god! Like, you need to arrest Will Ospreay."
There's nails there in that thing. I remember him saying when they ripped the thing off. But yeah, so I think, like, I don't know why they feel like they need a 3-man booth or a 4-man, or as some people said, maybe they don't even need to all be men. But I think that that Kevin Kelly and Excalibur would have been a perfect team for this show. Like, just the two of them. Chris Charlton, like, I think he has a role. I think it's better in Japan, because I think in Japan, like, he adds that translation piece, which is very helpful for English viewers.
Chris Charlton, very nice guy, by the way. I got to do an interview with Okada, and Charlton was there to help us do the translation.
Yeah, and I've had some interactions with him on Twitter, and he's always been really nice to me too. So I was happy to see him out there. And I know a lot of people were hoping he would stay around for the show. So hopefully he impressed people, and he gets some more work. Although he lives in Japan, so I'm not sure how much he could actually do for AEW. But yeah,
it's nice to hear our buddy Chris Samsa's voice on the broadcast as well.
Was he on he was on the broadcast?
I think Kevin Kelly mentioned his stats.
Oh, okay. Yeah. 17-2 in New Japan. I think that was Ospreay. One small nitpick of the Ospreay Omega. The only nitpick you're ever going to hear from anyone.
Except for when I complain about the finish.
They had an AEW ref. It should have been a New Japan ref.
Yep. When you pointed that out, I thought, yep, he's right. He's right.
But other than that, great show though. And I honestly, I'm no exaggeration, no word of a lie, I would have paid $100 for this show, and I'd have been happy. Like, this was a really good show.
Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao prices there.
Yeah, Connor too, right?
Connor and Mayweather as well.
Yeah. I think UFC now is like 85, isn't it?
It's definitely 80, I think, at least for me. The only other note, I just got a text from John Muse, who was at the presser at the Scrum, and I mentioned the Jericho angle. I guess John got hit with a bottle of water during this whole craziness that happened.
Wow! Like, when? Like,
during the Scrum.
Oh, wow! What craziness happened?
I didn't see it. I saw Jericho. I think it was Jericho Sting, because I saw a picture of that. And then I'm assuming it was during that, but I guess Jericho.
Is this an angle? Like, John's going into AEW now?
I'll be all for that, because John will make sense of some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I want to point that out, because people who watch the Scrum, if you did see this, and the person who got hit was a good friend of ours who was very smart about pro wrestling, by the way.
You know what? Being friends of ours is not good for your health. We had one of our friends got spit on at was it Revolution? John? Remember John? Was that Double or Nothing? He got spit on by MJF.
No way! I don't think I heard this.
Yeah, John Athridge. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It was a Dynamite, actually. It was the Dynamite before Double or Nothing. He was like, he literally spit in his face.
Jeez.
And this wasn't an angle. Like, and John's a really nice guy, but if John was someone else, like if it was you or me, like, we're getting paid. Like,
so Matthew watched the presser, and he said that Jericho threw a bottle up in the air, and then he hit it with a bat.
Wow.
So that bottle then.
So it wasn't like it hit him pretty hard.
Yeah, I think it did.
Wow.
So.
I hope John gets paid.
Oh, I hope John is not injured. Is what.
That too. Yeah, of course.
All right. So thanks, Paul. Thanks for hanging out and doing this. I know it's late for you. Thanks to people who are checking in on the chat. Really appreciate that. And that is our reaction show here. Fight Game Podcast Extra. So hopefully everyone checks out The Boom, which will be up tomorrow. no, actually Tuesday morning, because I believe Kevin Ely, James B. McDaniel, Jeremy Feinstein, and Stephen Conway. So you got the AEW
Wow.
side and the New Japan side. They're all going to be on the boom together. They're going to have that, that day later analysis. Paul and I are kind of reacting right after the show's over. They'll have a day to think about what happened and make some sense of stuff in that way. So make sure you check out the boom. They'll have their show, and it'll be very New Japan and AEW. They'll have both sides of the conversation there. So thank you to Paul again for doing this. I'm Double G. Thanks to people who are in the chat checking us out. Peace out.